Hi, I'm Franklin, and this is Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. How I Graduated from Law School is a series of interviews with practicing attorneys or legal professionals to find out more about their journey. The purpose is for you to hear about how other legal professionals became employed and started their careers following law school, or in some cases, relaunched their careers at a later stage in their profession. It's not just about young lawyers that we'll be talking with, but attorneys across all levels of experience and practice areas. The purpose isn't to try and prove the legal job market is perfect, because it's not, or convince you it's easy to get a job and there are tons of jobs out there, because there aren't. However, I do hope you gain some insights, ideas, tips, or other pieces of advice that can help you and your law school strategy. Because I do believe that if you work hard, follow the advice we share, you'll be closer than ever to graduating from law school with a job. On this episode, we have attorney Dennis Kennedy from St. Louis, Missouri. Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
Awesome. So let's just start off. Why did you go to law school? And what did you do or study before law school?
Well, I was talking, so I'm an in-house counsel for Mastercard these days, sort of, and we'll probably talk a little bit about my winding career path as we go on. But I was talking to one of our summer interns the other day who's thinking about going to law school, and she asked me that same question. And I realized how sort of unsatisfying my answer is to people and sometimes to me. So back when I left college, I was one of the people who everyone said, oh, you could be a lawyer, you have all these skills, you have this background, it translates well to being a lawyer. And if you don't know what you're going to do, which you could do back in those days, around 1980, you could just go to law school and then figure it out, because you would have this legal skill and this law degree and you could do something with it. So I had the chance to go to Georgetown to law school, and it was a great opportunity. Washington, D.C. was a city I wanted to live in. So it's not the most ennobling of reasons, but that's why I chose to go to law school. I think what was part of my thinking, though, that I think is a little bit unusual, is I wasn't really motivated by, oh, I want to do justice, or this great lawyer movie or lawyer TV show I saw. I sort of have always been interested in systems and processes and understanding those processes and finding ways to improve them. And so I didn't really realize that when I went to law school, but that's really one of the things that attracted me and let me stay with it. So a recurring theme, sort of untraditional route. So I was, for the first 2.5 years in college, I was a math major, very serious about that. Then I decided I was in totally the wrong area, totally the wrong major, and I switched completely with essentially one English class to becoming an English major, which I finished up in 3 semesters. And then I also took the stuff that interests me, which I realized the more I look back. So a lot of philosophy classes, a lot of classics classes that don't really, translate well to law school, but a recurring thing for me is I like going to places where my work reflects what I'm most interested in. So I think some of that, when I talked to our intern the other day, I was saying, I think business classes, what I call like the civics and government classes, I think would be useful to people going to law school. And I think classes that'll help you think critically are useful. And I'm not totally convinced that the classic pre-law types of classes are all that helpful, but they could work for some people.
Great. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I've heard very similar experiences and suggestions in terms of what to study or not study prior to going to law school. I heard it myself when I was back at that stage. So did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you get that job after law school?
I sort of feel like I need to answer this yes and no, because I recall I worked at this firm during law school for a summer and all throughout the school year. And I remember vividly one day when the office manager, and I think a couple of partners, called the summer clerks into a room and showed us the blueprints of the office expansion and where our offices would be. Later, before I graduated, they were laying off associates. This was 1983, which 82, 83 was a really terrible time in the economy. I'd argue it's worse now, but it is known as one of the bad times. So I went from thinking I had a job to not having a job, and ultimately decided to move from Washington, D.C. to St. Louis because I thought it would be fun to try to establish myself in a new city. And then I had this law degree that should count for something, and I had some really good college friends here. And so I said, I'm thinking of coming here. They were into that. I talked to a law firm in St. Louis. They said, oh my God, if you decide to come to St. Louis, when you get here, call us because we want to talk to you. We're very interested in you. And I said, okay, that's a sign, man, I'm going. And so I came out. The law firm decided they didn't have the budget to hire one more lawyer. I took the bar. I found a really great part-time job with the labor law firm, civil rights firm, doing some really cool things. Got the chance to clerk for one of the state trial courts here, work with judges. The pay was embarrassingly low, but it was really great fun. Worked with great judges. One of the people I worked with became mayor of St. Louis. So it was really great, great fun, great times, and so I did that. So roundabout way, I didn't really have a job. But I had to really think on my feet and work pretty hard to come up with something. I'd originally had the idea in law school. I was in a class in 1982 at Georgetown, which was one of the first computers in the law seminars in law school. And I was really into that, and I wanted to do computer law. Okay, so 1982, not a lot of potential for that, which I realized. So interestingly, one of my best friends, one of my friends I came out to St. Louis to hang out with, told me the other day, he said, at what you're doing at Mastercard is exactly what you wanted to do when you were in law school, because now I do what's clearly information technology law. I do, software. I used to do more hardware development, intellectual property. I'm with our mobile payments and our digital payments and labs groups. So I do all this cutting edge technology and the legal issues associated with it. So in this odd roundabout way, which I'll talk about some even more detours along the way, I kind of ended up where I was actually starting to look when I was in law school.
Wow, yeah, that definitely is a story and an experience that will surely resonate with law students that have recently graduated or currently graduating, considering the economy is basically the same or similar to what it was. I guess it's kind of like during the time that the AMC show Halt and Catch Fire that's currently on the air. It's around that time, that same time period. Well, that's really interesting and great advice to kind of just take a chance and go to a new city if you have opportunities there. And even though it didn't work out, you still found a way to make it work out. So what did your job search look like after the fact? Like when you got to the point in your career where you were able or eligible or a viable candidate to start doing lateral moves or even consider a complete change in your profession, even, or not profession, but the change in the area of law that you were practicing?
Yeah, so that happened a couple of times, and so when I look back, I think things were very traditional then. So when you worked on your resume, you thought about what the typeface was going to be, whether it should be cream or white or ivory paper, and you basically mailed resumes out. And so as I got involved in hiring at law firms I was at, and I ran the summer program at a law firm I was at, I realized so I learned a lot about the hiring process, and I would go so far to say that I did about everything wrong, and so there was a lot of luck involved, and one of the signature jobs of my career when I did estate planning with a firm here in St. Louis, a firm I became a partner in and was there for 10 plus years, was that it turned out that probably the distinguishing thing that gave me the job was as the guy I worked for all those years said, you write a great cover letter. And so it was the cover letter that became, as important as the resume. And then it gave me, what I learned later was that sometimes if you do certain things well, you're willing to learn, you show versatility, that you can be an attractive candidate, even if you don't have the exact experience that people are working for. So that translates into having good interview skills, into bundling together and putting together the skills you have in an attractive way, and then matching what you're doing to the actual job at hand. So I always did the traditional approach. When I came to Mastercard, that was because they needed somebody to come out on a contract basis, which I did, and then I ended up being employed by them. They converted me to an employee. These days, I would do everything. I would heavily concentrate on networking and LinkedIn. I just think it's a completely different world, and that sort of traditional resume approach, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense, whereas networking, to me, is exactly the way to go.
Great. Yeah, that's definitely good advice. I know a lot of people wonder about whether they should send out physical copies of their resume, which at times is obviously warranted, but in most cases, it's not like it used to be with the advent of LinkedIn and other digital ways to communicate and reach out to people. So like, how many jobs do you think you've applied for over the course of your career? And what was that process? I mean, you kind of explained it a little bit. Was there anything that you learned through that process?
Yeah, I sort of felt like in law school it was hundreds, and then fortunately the number has kind of really narrowed down over time. So I think that there is that sort of shotgun approach, whereas now I think that using something, say LinkedIn, other things, working at, establishing connections, seeing what you have in common, using alumni networks, those sorts of things, I think can be so much more valuable to you. And then also there was a time where I decided it didn't make sense for me to do everything on my own. So when I made big transitions, I used a career counselor. I've used a career coach in connection with my bigger career moves as well. And that to me is money well spent, or has been money well spent. And when I did the full-blown career coaching or career counseling, I just wish I would have done that to say much when I was young. And so probably you're talking, this is serious money to somebody coming out of law school to say, let's spend another $3,000 or whatever it might be, but say several $1,000s. But for somebody who can go back and say, okay, what is it that are your best skills? What is it that you want to do? How can I kind of package those in a better way? Makes you a better interviewer, allows you to target, teaches you some of the networking skills as well. That to me is probably the best investment I've ever made in my career. And then I have a friend who's a career coach who, on the tactical side, when I have questions of, should I take this job? What should I do? This sort of thing. I have somebody that I use on a regular basis for that, almost like an executive type of coach who's a friend of mine, and sort of determine how serious the issue or the question is when I say, okay, Wendy, I need to hire you, versus Wendy, I have a question for you. So I think that's something that is definitely worthwhile to look at, that sort of full-blown look into your career and maybe get some coaching, especially if you don't have family or friends who are in the legal profession, because I think that does put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely great advice, especially the career coach aspect of it. Were there any times that you struggled or faced challenges in the job search that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, I think at each stage in your career, there are going to be some different issues. So when you come out of law school, you need to figure out ways to translate whatever your experience you have into something that is meaningful to a law firm or a lawyer who might hire you. And so that, I think you want to take the sort of portfolio approach. What is there in different jobs, recommendations you have, papers you've written in law school, blogging, whatever, presentations you've done that you can kind of package into a portfolio. And I think just having something that shows actual things you've done can be really helpful. So I teach this class as an adjunct at WashU on intellectual property licensing and drafting. And so we do 8 assignments that are written assignments in contract drafting. And there's one of the assignments is to do a letter agreement. It's essentially a work made for hire, copyright, if somebody's going to write a software program. And it turns out to be a 3-page letter. And I think that turns into an excellent writing sample for people. So I think when you look at things like that to say, what are some of the things I've done, give some thought to writing samples, those sorts of things. So coming out, you have that, what have I done? And then how do I kind of figure out what it is and what I actually have done that will translate. As you go on further, you run into some different things. So when I was in the estate planning and tax area for a long time, I was one of the first lawyers with a web page in 1995. Got bit really badly by the internet bug, because in 1995 I thought the whole internet had passed me by and it was over and I'd missed the whole thing. But I decided to change careers to get into the information technology / e-commerce area. So I had to build portfolio there because I was making a complete switch. So I was a really highly regarded lawyer, in terms of ratings and stuff like that in a field, but not in where I wanted to go. So I was able to find somebody who could mentor me, and went into a firm that offered me that opportunity without the same status level I was at before, because of such a great opportunity. And then I think as you move, then you sort of say, well, how do I translate things? Like if I don't have a book of business, as you get older, what's the impact of that? What do I have to compensate for that? And then at the current stage, I would say probably my biggest thing, if I ever were looking to move, I would say, okay, how do I deal with the age question? And so so I do think about that, and I say, well, look, I'm all over the internet. I'm blogging, I podcast, I'm, in the work I do at Mastercard, I'm at the cutting edge technologies. So, if people don't want to hire somebody because, your hair is a little gray, I can't do anything about that, and I don't want to work for them anyway, but I can show that I have unique experience, unique skills, and a unique understanding of where the edge of technology is that's demonstrated. And that would be what I focused on if I were looking now. So there's an evolution, and I guess just a couple thoughts as I think about that I think have been good advice that I haven't really followed through on as well as I could. But I think the idea of, say, at least on an annual basis and maybe more often, to put together that list of your big projects, so you have that handy. When you interview, I love to ask a question like, tell me something you've done you're especially proud of. And if you have that right at hand, that makes you really compelling as an interviewee. But I think if you don't do that, and you start to get burned out and overwhelmed by your work, that can make looking for a job a little harder. But if you have that handy list where you go like, oh yeah, I got this great tax result. I won this case that nobody thought somebody could win, that sort of thing. If you're able to have 3 or 4 of those at any given time and you're talking to somebody, you're going to be so much more prepared in an interview, and you'll come off so much better in an interview than the typical interviewee. And that can make a ton of difference.
Definitely. That's some incredible advice that you have there. That's definitely a good point. So we're going to wrap up here, but I just wanted to see if there were any other final points or tips that you'd like to share that you think law students and recent graduates should be aware of.
Well, I guess that, I love talking to law students about this. I talk to some of the local law schools on a regular basis, and I love to hear questions about what's going on in the job market. I know it's a really tough market, so a lot of it is coming up with strategies that make sense in this tough market. So networking is huge. So that means organizations that you might not consider joining otherwise. Could be American Bar Association, could be other things, but just so you get the chance to meet people and potential mentors. That's big. Informational interviewing, I think, is really significant. Establishing some kind of internet presence, LinkedIn, blogging, whatever, so that you're out there, so people can find you is important. And then also, I'm just really big. I've gotten a little closer to sort of like the new legal education movement. And I think that the clinical classes, practical classes are huge. I mean, in the class I teach, which I took over from somebody who taught it for a long time, is that licensing and drafting class, the students who take that say it's made a huge difference in their career. I mean, it's helped them get a job in a way, but it's helped, they're able to say, oh, I know how to draft a contract. I know what somebody's looking for. I know what questions to ask, that sort of thing. And so I think all the practical skills you can get, and then obviously any kind of part-time work you can get. At Georgetown, everybody worked part-time. Kind of in St. Louis, it's a different approach to things. Not many students work part-time, but every bit of experience you get gives you good exposure, and a lot of people get jobs because they started working part-time and just did a great job at it.
Definitely, yeah. Well, okay, I mean, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
So thank you, Dennis, for taking the time to talk and share some really awesome insights and experiences.
Great. It's a pleasure. Like I said, I really enjoy talking to law students about this, and I've made enough mistakes and hopefully learned from a few of them that I can pass some things on, I think, that are helpful.
Great. Yeah. And thank you for watching. And make sure you subscribe for future episodes of Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job.